Hello, and welcome to A Sound Constitution here on CHLY 101.7 FM. This is a show where we focus on health topics that are important to our community. This year's team is made up of 6 third-year VIU nursing students. Our goal? To demystify health issues and address common misconceptions by sharing evidence-informed information from a variety of reliable sources. All information provided on our show will be available in our show notes, on our Facebook and Instagram pages. We want to remind listeners that the information presented in this show is for educational purposes only. It does not replace the advice of your primary healthcare professional. If you have any questions or concerns about what's being discussed, feel free to reach out to us on Facebook at A Sound Constitution, on Instagram at CHLY, A Sound Constitution, all one word, or email us at asoundconstitution@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we're looking forward to this journey with you.
We begin today by acknowledging that we are gathered on the unceded and traditional lands of the Nanaimo people, whose rich cultural history continues to inspire and guide us. Our broadcast also extends into the territories of the Coatsan and the Sliaman nations. We are deeply thankful for the Nanaimo people's enduring connection to this land and for the opportunity to live, learn, and work here today. We make this acknowledgement with a commitment to honor and respect Indigenous cultures, traditions, and histories, and to actively participate in the ongoing work of truth and reconciliation. For more information on the ongoing reconciliation work and land acknowledgement practices of the Nanaimo people, we invite you to visit our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube pages.
Hello, and welcome to The Human Side of Underhousing on A Sound Constitution. Before we begin, we would like to provide a content warning. This episode includes discussion about harm reduction, substance use, and the experiences of people who are unhoused. Some of the content may be sensitive or triggering, particularly for those with lived experience relating to substance use, homelessness, or mental health challenges. Our goal is to foster understanding, compassion, and awareness through open conversations, but we would also like to recognize the importance of taking care of your well-being. If at any point you find the content distressing, we encourage you to pause, step away, and seek support if needed. Resources for support and information will be provided in our show notes. Thank you for listening and for joining us in these vital conversations. Hello, and welcome to the show. You're listening to A Sound Constitution on 101.7 CHLY. I'm Finley, one of your hosts today, on our second episode, The Human Side of Underhousing. Today, my co-host Sophia, Brianne, and I will explore some of the factors influencing underhousing, examine the attitudes towards this community, and ask the important question, what can we do to help? We'll share valuable resources, interesting facts, and be sure to stick around until the end for a very special interview with Nanaimo's own Sarah Lovegrove, an experienced provider of harm reduction services who will share her insights and wisdom. If you missed our first episode and want to catch up, you can find it on Spotify under A Sound Constitution. But first, I went downtown to speak with the people who know best what it's like to be underhoused, the people living it. Their voices are too often unheard. Let's jump right into it. So first off, how long have you been unhoused for?
6 years.
6 years?
Yeah.
Okay. If you're comfortable, would you like to share a little bit about how you became unhoused? Only if you're comfortable.
Yeah, it was through my addiction. My mom didn't want me using around my siblings, which was fair enough.
Yeah. Fair enough. Are there any resources in the area that you use? And what resources do you find helpful?
Currently, I'm staying at usually I stay at St. Peter's shelter, but just recently we're staying at the extreme weather shelter in Bevan, and it's really good there. I find it really, they're helpful and nice. Staff is great.
What services do you think Nanaimo needs more of?
More housing, or more help trying to get housing, like advocacy.
I heard some other people say it was very hard to get on lists, to get like approved for any sort of low income housing. Do you guys have any experience with that?
Yeah.
2 years.
Like
2 years it's taken me to get a house after I lost my house from a person passing away.
yeah, no, this is really hard.
What is something you wish more people knew about being unhoused?
Just if they could switch the shoes for one night, just to live in our shoes, they'd know a little bit more about it.
We're not different creatures, we're all humans.
Yeah.
We're all the same, and not all of us want to be on the streets, and we weren't asking for it. We just had to be.
Do you have a family doctor? Where do you go when you need health care?
I do have a family doctor. He's at a Qualcomm, but I come here for healthcare.
Nice. Have your experiences been with the healthcare system? Have you faced any challenges?
Once, yes, with my first doctor, but now that I've moved to a new doctor, it's been going good.
What can individuals and the community do to be supportive?
Be less judgmental. Maybe don't one person ruins it for everybody. I understand that, but not all of us are like garbage freaks and throwing garbage everywhere. And
So, first off, just how long you been unhoused for?
A year and a half, probably.
A year and a half?
Yeah.
All right.
I had a year clean. I came down here to do treatment, continue my treatment. Then I was at BITC, third stage house, the Oasis house. And that's when I relapsed on my 1 year clean day of all days.
Yeah.
And so I got kicked out.
Are there any resources in the area that you use? What resources have you found to be helpful?
Here, St. Peter's, downstairs at the hub is good. Good. Salvation Army, I use them from time to time. Reds, I go there, you can get a coffee and muffin or whatever. It's like the pay it forward thing. You can donate $5 and then you can buy someone a coffee and muffin, right? So when I get my check, I'll donate whatever, $50 or $40, whatever I can do. Mm-hmm. And then when I don't have any money, I can go there and get a coffee and muffin. Yeah.
Do you have a family doctor? Where do you go when you need medicine? When you need health care?
Here.
Come here?
Yeah. AVI.
AVI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is where I get Ventura, and then I get my Methodos and my Acadian up at the pharmacy upstairs.
How have your experiences been in the healthcare system? Have you faced any challenges or discrimination?
Oh yeah, with doctors, they shuffle you out of the hospital, and then once they find out that you're an addict or something, then they totally treat you different. It's like a stereotype. They judge you on one thing, right? Like the way you're dressed, or because you're an addict, or whatever, right? Even stores, the same thing, right?
One more question. What's something you wish more people knew about being unhoused?
How hard it is, yeah. Is you don't have any safe place to store your stuff. Your stuff's constantly getting stolen because you don't have any safe place to store it, right? It's just a vicious cycle. It just goes on and on and on, right? One person has their stuff stolen, so then they steal someone else's, and they steal someone else's, and I don't do that myself. I just replace my stuff, right? But then you have less money for anything else. Right?
Well, thank you very much for your time, sir.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
for about 8 years.
About 8 years?
Yeah.
Would you like to share a little bit of how you became unhoused?
Came to Nanaimo thinking that it would be cheaper than Vancouver because Vancouver was just getting way too expensive.
Yeah.
And it was at first, and then everything skyrocketed, and once I lost my house, it was impossible to get another spot.
Are there any resources in the area that you use? What resources have you found to be helpful?
The warming center.
Warming center?
Yeah, the one right down there.
Yeah.
They're extremely helpful. They give us food, warm drinks.
What's something you wish more people knew about being unhoused?
Well, that we're just like everybody else, and you know what? It could happen to anybody.
Do you have a family doctor? Where do you go when you need health care?
I don't. The Nanaimo Hospital is so disgusting. They're so prejudiced and so non-helpful. It's really disgusting. I'd rather cough my lungs out on the street than go to that hospital.
So your experiences with the healthcare system have been less than wonderful.
No, that's an understatement.
Yeah. You face prejudice in the ER when you go to see healthcare?
Yep, absolutely. Especially because drug habits.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't used to. Before I became homeless, I didn't do drugs. But since being homeless, I became hooked on meth, hooked on fentanyl. There needs to be more housing. There needs to be better resources. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's just going to get worse.
What can individuals in the community do to be supportive?
You know, help. Like,
Just help.
Just
help.
And like, if you see somebody cold or something,
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe get them a cup of coffee or something. You know, like we're all human beings.
We're all human beings.
Right?
It doesn't take a lot. The little things, right?
It's the little things that matter.
Mm-hmm. Just caring enough to say, hi, how you doing? Would you like a cup of coffee? Are you doing all right?
Yeah. Or here's a old blanket, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Other than that, I don't know.
Yeah. Do you have anything else you'd like to say to our listeners? Any message you'd like to send?
Stop throwing things at us.
Yeah, that's a big thing. Just the public perception, the disrespect of people on the streets.
Yeah, you know, like.
Judge a book by its cover.
What was that, sir?
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah, don't judge a book by its cover.
Treat others as you'd have treated into yourself.
Yeah, the golden rule.
You know, I've literally had to like protect people because of regular 9-to-5 Joe Blow guys are like chasing us down like we're animals, and it's disgusting, right? Just because we have nowhere to go. The bylaw move us around like we're cattle, and we have nowhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
And yet they keep on pushing us places. It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it's getting ridiculous.
I agree with you. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Yep. See?
If you didn't catch that, we were just hollered at as a car drove by.
Yeah. That's what we deal with daily.
Non-stop.
Non-stop, along with eggs, a couple glass bottles. Oh yeah.
What is your recourse when that happens? Can you go to the police? Is there anybody to help you?
The cops are just as bad, if not worse. Actually, they're worse. The cops are actually part of the main problem out here, and they've been harassing us and like non-stop, like bad, like you know how cold it is in the morning? It's bad, like, and to get literally kicked while you're in a sleeping bag is quite disturbing. You know, we're people too. What's going on?
It's time for Did You Know?
Did you know in the community of Nanaimo, only 68% of people own the home they live in? 23.4% of people in central Vancouver Island who have a home to live in spend 30% or more of their monthly income on shelter. 21% of people who live in central Vancouver Island and have a home to live in spend well over 30% of their monthly income, but less than 100%. Of those people who are spending 30% or more of their income on housing, 4% were found that their homes needed major repairs, and 2.5% were found to be living in unsuitable conditions. Nanaimo News Now reported that in 2024, the average monthly cost of a one-bedroom apartment in Nanaimo was $1,855 per month, and the average cost for a two-bedroom apartment was $2,378 per month. These may sound high, but these prices have actually come down about 0.9% and 3.3% respectively since the previous year. The 2024 Nanaimo State of the Economy report found that the median household income in 2023 was $81,606 per year, with 61% of all households having an annual income of less than $100,000 per year. If you are interested in learning more about any of the information presented here today, please check out our show notes from today's episode. If you're just tuning in now, you're listening to A Sound Constitution on CHLY 101.7 FM.
Hey everyone, it's Brienne. I just wanted to share a TED Talk that I found by Kimberly Stratton called The Homeless Are Not Who You Think They Are. I think she does an absolutely incredible job of drawing from her own experiences and redefining homelessness, and it fits right in with the rest of this very important episode. So, without further ado, let's take a listen.
What is blurring the line? It's where a person makes it difficult to see the exact truth about something. And in this case, I'm talking about homelessness. It's seeing something right in front of you and not acknowledging the true oppressive state that it really is. There was a time you could tell when a person was homeless. Maybe they appeared unclean, looked unclean, clothes disheveled, maybe their hair, their facial appearance. Maybe there was a smell, and you said to yourself, that person's homeless. Maybe you could tell they didn't have a bath taken that day or for several days. But that's all changed. Yes, many appear described because we are conditioned to believe that because that's all we see on the television, that's all we see on the news, that's what's brought before us. But the face of homelessness is changing. It's becoming harder and harder to recognize. Homelessness is no longer limited to just simply living on the street or on the sidewalk or in a makeshift tent or staying in a shelter. Maybe it's seeing that student or that same person you pass by in the library, day in, day out, same time every day. But they appear to be aimlessly walking with no direction. Or maybe it's that person that you see when you're walking downtown, that you happen to see every day, the same time, but maybe it's different. They're wearing similar clothes, but yet still appear to be walking aimlessly with no place to go. Homelessness is unstable and unhealthy living conditions, going from place to place, sometimes making a decision between, do I purchase food today for my family, or do I pay car insurance? Do I pay the rent or the mortgage, or do I purchase clothing for the children to attend school? Or even worse, staying in an abusive and toxic situation just so that you can have a roof over your head, or simply a permanent address for your child to attend school. I know that all too well, and here's my story. My mom and I, we were homeless. By definition of living from place to place. See, we were trying to avoid toxic family members who showed their love through mental and physical abuse. It wasn't conducive for us at all. And because that toxic and abusive love they tried to show, we had to move from place to place to place. Yes, I had clothes from the consignment shop. My mother purchased them, she washed them, she pressed them, and I looked really good going to school. Yeah, I had food, but at the same time, as I got older and started counting the food, because many of our meals consisted of hot dogs, I realized that my mom was not eating because there appeared to be more in the pack than there really should have been. And I'll never know how she did it. She worked 3 jobs just to get me through as a single parent. I never felt homeless. I was never uncared for. I was never unclean. So by society standards, I wasn't homeless because I didn't look the part. But in all honesty, we were. As I grew older, my sympathetic fondness grew for the homeless and the less fortunate community. And to this day, I engage and I feed them. And by the end of this talk, I will show you how to do the exact same. But first, let me share some of the testimonials of the individuals that I've met. In assisting the unhoused and less fortunate, I've met tons of people and countless testimonies of survival and why they were not living in a permanent address, why they either were sleeping on the street or why they were running from a toxic situation that I was very familiar with. I met a married Caucasian lady in her 40s. She decided she could no longer tolerate her spouse mentally and physically abusing her and their children. And so she said, I have to go. But where do I go? He alienated her from her family and friends so that she had no support system. When social services came, everybody was fine. They smiled. They looked the part. They explained the bruises. Oh, the girls was playing too rough. Oh, I fell down. Oh, it was just this, it was that. It was always an excuse. So they passed. So she finally said, I have to go. And she did. She lived from shelter, place to place, and finally ended up homeless on the street with her children because they were safer on the street than they were in her household. She said to them, we don't ever want to be separated, so we can't tell people what's really going on. I met a divorced Caucasian woman in her 30s whose son was murdered in their hallway. She says, I just had to get that one item for dinner. So her and her son were making dinner, and she said to him, don't answer the door. The same thing all parents tell their children, right? Don't answer the door for anyone. I'm going to be right across the street. Just get this one item. She goes across the street, but as she's getting to that process, she walks down the stairs, and she passes this male stranger and had this pit in her stomach, an uneasiness. But she just chalked it off as, don't be paranoid. She comes back with the one item for dinner. As she's making her way up the stairwell, before she even reaches the top, she notices her door is ajar. She starts climbing those stairs so quickly. And to her dismay, she sees her son lying in the hallway, dead. She says, why should I be on this earth when my son can no longer be here? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry my treasures with me. I'm going to carry his favorite book, his teddy bear, and my shopping cart. I'm going to carry my favorite coat because these were our treasures. If he can't live here comfortably, neither should I. That's why she was living on the street. To this day, it is still a cold case. What about the African-American pregnant teen that I met? She fell in love, just like we all do, right? We meet someone, we fall in love, but he showed his love through physical abuse. He couldn't keep his hands to himself. Her family said, you can stay, so can the baby, but he can't come around. She chose him, he chose someone else. She ended up on the street because she felt she had no options, nowhere to go. The stories and testimonials that I shared with you, the mothers, the teens, these women were clean. They did not look homeless. They were well-dressed, and I never would have guessed that they were homeless when they stood in my food line. But regardless of the testimonies, again, homelessness has no face. A newborn, an infant, a toddler, a child, a preteen, a teenager. I'm trying to unblur the TV's image in your mind and replace it with reality. It can be a young adult, a senior citizen, male or female, rich or well-to-do, it does not matter. Please do not fool yourself and think NIMBY, not in my backyard.
It's time for Did You Know?
Did you know that the population of Nanaimo in 2023 was 107,800 people? Did you know that 3 out of every 1,000 people in Nanaimo are currently experiencing homelessness? In 2023, the most recent point-in-time count was collected, and they reported that 510 individuals are experiencing homelessness in Nanaimo. It is also important to know that these numbers are not exact and are actually likely an underestimation. Based on these numbers and the previous point-in-time count, it is estimated that at least 104 new individuals in Nanaimo are experiencing housing insecurity. The same point-in-time count found that there were approximately 11,352 unhoused individuals just on Vancouver Island. Of those over 11,000 people, 47% said that they were unsheltered and regularly slept outside. Of the remaining 53% of individuals, 12% were utilizing a tent or other form of makeshift shelter, 11% were living out of a vehicle, 21% said that they stayed at someone else's home, and the remaining 7% of people reported staying in abandoned or vacant buildings, in hotels and motels, with a guardian or parent, at a client's home, or were unable to remember or unable to communicate where they stayed. If you would like to read any of these reports for yourself, please check out our show notes from today's episode on Instagram, Facebook, or in the description on YouTube or Spotify.
Thanks, Sophia. Well, it's been an informative show so far, and there's still more to come. We're excited to bring you a special guest. Please join us for an exclusive interview with Sarah Lovegrove right here on A Sound Constitution. So first off, we would like to welcome Sarah Lovegrove to the show. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for asking me.
Amazing. We're just going to go through a bit of a conversation, ask a couple questions. I guess, I'll just hop right into it. Sure. Please tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you practice, and your background.
Sure. So I am a registered nurse. I've been a registered nurse since about 2016. I used to work in the emergency department. So I originally trained in Ontario, then came out to BC and worked in both Cowichan District Hospital and NRGH emergency departments. I left the emergency departments at about 2018 with post-traumatic stress disorder and kind of evolved my practice since then, doing a lot of work in the community with harm reduction. So I'm the former chair of the Nanaimo Community Action Team on the toxic drug crisis. I've done a lot of community advocacy around harm reduction, and now currently practicing as a teacher at VIU. I'm a professor with the Bachelor of Science in Nursing program, and I'm also the vice president of the Harm Reduction Nurses Association, which is a national nursing association advocating for harm reduction.
Wow, that's quite the list of credentials you got there. You've done a whole lot of everything, eh?
I have, yeah. I'm very honored to do this work.
Did you have a favorite piece, or did your favorite piece change over time?
But what I love the most about nursing is that you can evolve your career and change it at any time. And I never imagined myself working in this field with this crisis. But there is such a need right now with this public health crisis and with the number of people who are dying. And I feel very honored and privileged to be able to be an advocate and a voice in this space. So I truly love teaching, and I find that an incredible space to be able to do advocacy work and to prepare nurses moving forward to be able to manage and practice within the context of this crisis. And so honestly, I love all of it. I think this is such an amazing career to be a part of, and I'm just very honored to be able to do it.
Amazing. With your background in harm reduction and as someone connected with the community, what are some of the worrying trends regarding substance use and our unhoused community that you've been seeing?
Yeah. So honestly, like one of the ongoing major concerns and the most worrying trend that's happening in our communities is this toxic drug crisis. And what that looks like is increasing toxicity and unpredictability of the unregulated illicit supply of drugs. So what I've seen since being here in BC is increasingly the content of the illicit supply, and that's not just regarding like opioids. That includes like methamphetamines, party drugs, plant medicines, anything like that. They're becoming increasingly toxic with fentanyl and other additives like benzodiazepines, and that continues to complicate responses to overdoses and worsen the health impacts on people. And we also, like one of the most worrying trends, I would say, in our community is the lack of social determinants of health. So lack of shelter, lack of homes for people who are unhoused, and the worsening affordability crisis. Everything is becoming more expensive, And we're also seeing an increase in stigma and right-wing kind of political responses to what people are talking about regarding public safety and reactions to this toxic drug crisis, like involuntary care and increased policing that do nothing to really address that unregulated toxic supply of drugs that's worsening health outcomes for people.
Yeah, I think those are all really big points. We conducted a couple interviews over the last couple of days with some unhoused people in the streets of Nanaimo, and they really echoed a lot of those points. More housing, definitely increase in toxicity of drugs. Yeah. What resources do you think Nanaimo is lacking?
Well, I mean, we need housing. I think everyone can agree. Just seeing the reality of our community right now, we need people to be in housing. As nurses, we can understand that access to housing is the pillar of health. People cannot heal or evolve in their own personhood without access to shelter, especially with regards to substance use and recovery or treatment. That cannot happen without housing. And so we need that. We need everyone under a roof and everyone to feel safe before we can move forward with other responses to the toxic drug crisis. And we need social supports that are culturally safe and trauma-informed. And we don't necessarily have that within the context of our healthcare system at this moment. I know there's movement towards that, but it's definitely a gap in service. And I would say, despite kind of public opinion, we do not have access to harm reduction services as much as we need to within the context of this crisis. So we only have one overdose prevention site in our community, and that's located downtown. But we should be having more overdose prevention sites at different areas of our community for people to access as needed.
I heard from the interviews I conducted lots of the same sentiments. More services, just not nearly enough.
Yeah, I think people really misunderstand like the needs of people like without housing. So, people complain a lot about what they see on the street in terms of behavior, but I like to encourage people to reflect on, what their own behavior is like inside their own houses and how people really don't have, like, privacy is not a privilege for people who are unhoused, right? And so, we need access to bathrooms, we need access to laundry, we need access to people to have, make phone calls and have internet. And that's just like a massive, massive gap for people right now to be able to move forward in their lives.
100%. What are some resources you wish more people knew about?
So one resource I wish people knew more about within, the context of increasingly toxic drugs is access to drug checking. So drug checking is available every hour that the overdose prevention site on Albert Street is open locally. So you can bring substances there and have them checked, and you can see the contents of those substances and the level of, fentanyl in it. For example, if you're looking for fentanyl-free substances, they can tell you if it's present or not, and they can also tell you how much is in it if that's something you're able to tolerate. So that's our a local resource that we have, but there's also an organization in Victoria that offers mail-in services. It's called Substance, and they do drug checking services that you can mail a portion of your substance in and have a response about the content of it via email or text. And I think these are services that everyone who uses drugs, whether it's recreationally or on an ongoing basis, if they're accessing the illicit supply, they should know what the drug is they're taking. And so that's a really essential service that I think is overly stigmatized and misunderstood. And it saves people's lives on a regular basis. And another thing I wish people knew, especially with regard to access to healthcare, is the addictions medicine services at NRGH. And I know it's becoming more and more well known, and we know it as nurses who are working there. But I think the average person who uses substances, especially if they're new to the community, don't know to ask for that service when they go in. And that gives them 5 day a week, 9 to 5 access to physicians, nurses, social workers who are sensitive and understanding and compassionate to people who use drugs and people in relationship with substances. And that helps make that health service a little bit more accessible.
Wow, that's a lot of resources around Nanaimo I didn't know about.
Yeah. We can, anyone can access the drug checking, and it's available for, I advocate, I would imagine most of the listeners here today are students, and I know students, we can't detach the idea that students, are more akin to partying and doing exploring substances than others. I mean, I was a student once too, and everyone that's kind of the culture around being a student is celebrating partying, consuming substances, whether it's alcohol or otherwise. And before you go out and before you engage in any kind of substance use, you should be bringing those substances to be checked and verified that they are what you think that they are.
Absolutely. It's almost like the 10 rights of medication administration. You just know the right drug, the right dose, the right patient, and you lose all that when you don't know what substances you're taking.
Absolutely. That is a really great point. We really should be knowing, exactly what we're taking. And with the illicit supply right now, it's completely unpredictable. Like it's a game of Russian roulette. People have referred to it as that. So people, for their own bodily autonomy and for their own knowledge and just well-being of them and their friends, they should know what they're taking. So if you're taking cocaine or MDMA at a party, you should know that that is what it is and that it's not tainted with fentanyl or other additives.
What are some of the barriers to accessing healthcare you have noticed, specifically concerning the unhoused population and people who use substances?
Yeah, well, I would say the major barrier to accessing health services across our community and across the island is stigma. People who use drugs, people who are unhoused or generally marginalized otherwise, feel a lot of stigma when they access healthcare services. So when they go to the hospital, when they go to the emergency department, they feel judged. They feel that they're being treated lesser than because of their relationship with substances. And that's just not okay. Everyone has equal access and equal right it is a human right to access healthcare services. And unfortunately, because of the culture of healthcare, because of its colonial roots, we do treat people who use substances as other. And I encourage, healthcare workers to consider, their own biases and their own understanding of substances when they're treating all people within the healthcare service. And unfortunately, politics makes this a lot worse. So when substances were decriminalized in 2023, it was actually for the purpose of decreasing stigma and increasing access to health services. But that decriminalization pilot was reversed in April. And since then, we've actually seen more criminalization of people who use substances within healthcare. So more interaction with security, more interaction with police, more barring and banning of people from services. And that's going in the wrong direction when we're trying to increase accessibility of services.
Absolutely. I heard some of those same sentiments when I was doing my walkabout interviews yesterday. People there were saying that they've just seen a massive increase the amount of hate and yelling at and people throwing things at them. Even while I was conducting interviews, people were hollering at me because of where I was. Yeah. So they've seen definitely the stigmatization for sure.
Yeah. The community temperature around unhoused people and people who use drugs is unfortunately not sustainable. I've seen, working with people who live on the street or live pretty rough. I've also seen, people throw things at them. People try to hit people who are unhoused with their cars. Like this community is very volatile when it comes to people who use drugs. And I think that needs to be addressed more directly. And that breaks my heart that you're hearing that as well. It's such a common experience. And yeah, I think we could all really serve to do a little bit of self-growth and self-education around how we see people who use drugs in our community.
Well, I know you participated in the unsanctioned overdose prevention site outside of NRGH. Could you please tell us what that event was about and why you felt the need to attend?
Mm-hmm. So that is such an incredible honor to be able to participate in that, and I support these efforts fully. I have been connected to the team inside of NRGH who does addictions medicine and was lucky enough to connect with Dr. Jess Wilder, who coordinated this overdose prevention site. And it stems from this idea of stigma within the healthcare system and lack of services. So NRGH and other hospitals on the island do not have an overdose prevention site on site. So people who use drugs who are inpatients or accessing the hospitals could use safely and with support. So this small protest and this action was put into place to convince Island Health to move forward with their original plans to put an overdose prevention site outside of our hospital to keep people alive. Because basically, At this point, people who use drugs who are actively in relationship with substances are asked to leave NRGH property or forced to use in isolations like bathrooms or use covertly at the bedside, which puts them at higher risk of death and injury and puts healthcare workers at risk of exposure. So I felt the need to attend this as a community member, as a nurse. I've seen this as a needed service outside of our hospital since I worked in the ER back in 2018. People need somewhere to go to be safe and feel supported amidst this toxic drug crisis. People's need to use substances physiologically does not end when they walk through the hospital doors, and we cannot meet their needs despite the best efforts because we're constantly trying to catch up to the toxicity of this supply. And so people need somewhere to go to be able to use safely and still have access to services. And something I remind my students of is that people use drugs. That is not their only health concern. People who use drugs are human beings with bodies. So, they need to get their appendix out. They have issues with their hearts. They also get cold, flus, COVIDs, pieces like that. And they need access to healthcare services that meet them where they're at. And right now in our hospital, we cannot do that without an overdose prevention site. And I think it's really important that we advocate for that service because my students are future nurses at NRGH and within Island Health, and they deserve to practice in a space that honors and supports the needs of everyone that they care for. And they are put at risk of moral distress and moral injury not being able to support their patients in the most evidence-informed and culturally safe way. And all nurses at NRGH deserve to feel safe in their workplace, and an overdose prevention site reduces their exposure to illicit substances and other paraphernalia. So my motivation for supporting this site is broad and I feel motivated from a lot of different directions, but ultimately we're in a public health crisis that's killing over 6 people in our province a day. And we need to have some bold responses to that, including overdose prevention sites at the hospital, despite the public or the political and public opinions on that. Yeah.
I think a lot of people listening will share those sentiments.
Yeah.
Do you know if there's any other planned protests, other pop-up OPS happening that you're aware of?
Yeah. So the first one that I was a part of and the first one that popped up was in November, and there were sites at NRGH and at Royal Jubilee in Victoria. And since then, they've had pop-up sites at Comox Valley. We've had other dates at NRGH, and the next dates are coming up. I'm not going to share the dates at the moment, but coming up very soon at CDH in Duncan, and they're planning more and more each month moving forward. So these doctors for safer drug policy are not stopping, despite pushback from Island Health and despite some unfortunate penalties for those involved. And they're continuing to advocate for the people that they care for in healthcare. And they know that this public health emergency is only worsening. So they're pushing as hard as they can, which I think is incredibly honorable. And I value very much as a healthcare worker.
That's honorable for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Very selfless acts. We will help these people because they deserve to be helped, not because that's what people say we can do, not because, we're sanctioned to do it, because it's right.
Yeah. Exactly. Like as healthcare professionals, we have to do what's best for our patients first and not prioritize politics or administrative whatever that are being put forward as a priority over people's lives right now.
Yeah. What everyday actions can you and I do to support these communities?
So just thinking, as human beings who exist in this community, we're all community members. I think what you can do most, first and foremost, is be kind. We can demonstrate compassion by, instead of when we walk by someone who's living a more marginalized, unfortunate life, we can offer people a smile. We can offer kind words. We can, something I like to do when I'm out is, buying people lunch or coffee or things like that. So people have, at least 20 to 30 minutes inside of the restaurant to warm up. We can lean into our community a little bit more. We can, move away from this sort of individualistic lifestyle and leaning into our community by, offering supports. We can donate if we have extra, either clothing, goods, or finances if we have it. I think one thing that people can do, which is a pretty easy thing to do, is actually carry naloxone and know how to use it. And if you're not comfortable responding to overdoses, at least you have naloxone on you when something happens, and you can offer it to someone else to save someone's life. And I think as community members, we can just open our hearts a little bit more and demonstrate, community-centered, human-centered empathy to a really massive crisis that people are suffering within right now. As nurses, nursing students, we can advocate for equitable services within our healthcare. So I believe nurses have the power to impact change quite broadly within healthcare and use their voice. And it's important for nurses specifically to stand up for what they believe in. We're the most trusted profession within healthcare, within our world, and we have the hugest number of people within our profession. So if we use our voice to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves, then we can make the healthcare and our communities a better place.
Just looking out for your neighbors.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've moved a little too far away from, supporting our neighbors and supporting the people who need it. And there's a lot of money out there. So, when we think about the top 1% right now, they have the resources to actually, fix this problem. And it's a choice that they're not, right? And so I think we can, become a little bit more charitable within our communities with both our kindness and our finances.
One of the things that, I like to do is, go to the gas station or you get a little snack or something. They always have the 2-for-1 deals. So, I can get 2 for 1 and literally no skin off my teeth, right?
Yeah. I think that's such an important thing to think about, and something honestly I never considered either. But if we're ever given extra, I think it's good for the soul and it's good for our communities and it's good for just our social well-being to share that wealth. So that's a really special way to create change on an individual level.
You mentioned carrying naloxone. I was just wondering, where could people get naloxone if they were interested?
Yeah, so right now you can get take-home naloxone at any pharmacy in BC. You can just go in and ask for one, and you get it for free. So the injectable naloxone is free across BC. You can go to overdose prevention sites. You can get it from the hospital. Public Health has a bunch, but your easiest place to go get it would be at any pharmacy. And you can learn how to use take-home naloxone online. So there's a website called Toward the Heart, which has a training module on there. And there's also overdose prevention trainings. We've done some at VIU, and there's lots of different overdose prevention trainings offered by organizations like AVI that you can learn how to use it. And if you are someone who's covered by First Nations Health Authority, you actually also have access to nasal naloxone for free. So that's unfortunately not something that BC covers broadly, but it is available to people. So these are all different options for people to be able to access naloxone that they can carry around themselves.
Amazing. And finally, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Yeah, took me a while to think about this question, but I think what I'd really like to kind of share and express is the idea that we should not, as community members, as human beings with beating hearts, we shouldn't succumb to kind of the compassion fatigue and exhaustion by what we're seeing on a regular basis. And that means, nurses not normalizing the experiences of what they're seeing in the hospital right now, but also us as community members not normalizing the number of people that we're seeing unhoused and living rough. So, service providers estimate that we have over 1,000 unhoused community members in the borders of Nanaimo right now. And that's not normal. And that should be far from what we accept as a community. And we need to actively use our voice every day, despite the exhaustion, despite the fear, despite the discomfort. We need to be pushing for better baseline health standards for all people. We are voters. We have the power. And just because politicians are sitting in office doesn't mean that they're leaders. So we should really be looking to people with lived and living experience, leaders who are doing the work on the front lines, and people who are dedicating themselves to action and community-focused changes. Those are the leaders that we should be listening to. And that we should be following suit with. So we're seeing kind of a disjointed response right now from politicians who are, seeking to satisfy a certain group of voters who are, the tax-paying, home-owning voters. But we, as a community, have a voice with our vote, and we can push for alternative responses, more community-centered, more human-focused responses to these multiple crises that are happening within our community. And we can't succumb to that fatigue and that exhaustion and normalization of it, because this is not normal and we should not be accepting it as a community.
There's a lot of wisdom in what you said. There's a lot of truth. That's hard-hitting stuff.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving us the time. I'm sure our listeners are love hearing about this. It's really important stuff.
Well, I really appreciate you and your classmates, organizing this and being able to share this information is very close to my heart. And I think we need to be having more frank, direct conversations about this subject. So I really appreciate you dedicating the time on the show to do it.
Talking about it's the only way to break the stigma.
Yeah, I agree. And I really appreciate it. That's why I love students, is you're all so willing and open to have these conversations and to learn about it from a very neutral place. You're focused on humans and you want to be the best nurses that you can. And I think that's incredible.
Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
Thank you for listening. For details and show notes from today's episode, or to follow along on what's coming up this season, check out our Facebook page, A Sound Constitution, or our Instagram at CHLY, A Sound Constitution. If you missed today's episode, or if you'd like to listen to one of our previous episodes, check us out on Spotify or YouTube at A Sound Constitution. We want to remind our listeners that the information presented in this show is for educational purposes only and does not replace the advice of your primary healthcare professional. Thanks again, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.